When the American Revolutionary War broke out, Stephen Higginson was one of the wealthiest men in Virginia. In fact, let me say that again. He was one of the wealthiest men in Massachusetts. In fact, he has a lot in common with John Hancock. Now, even before the war itself breaks out in 1771, Higginson is actually sent to London to speak. He testifies before Parliament to discuss why the people of Boston are so unhappy, why the colonists are so resistant to the taxation, why they're so upset about impressment of sailors into the Navy, and why they're so unhappy that there are the British Army, a standing army in Massachusetts. Now, this doesn't go very well, and he returns to Massachusetts radicalized, and he joins the Patriot cause and very quickly becomes a leader of the American cause in Massachusetts. Now, as the hostilities emerge, Higginson uses his power as a merchant to outfit his ships as privateers. So not only does he help attack British ships at sea, he also makes a great deal of money off of those attacks, much like John Hancock. He, also like Hancock, Higginson is sent to the Continental Congress. He spends 4 years in the Continental Congress and is there when they oversee the ratification of the Treaty of Paris and ending the Revolutionary War. Now, Higginson goes back to Massachusetts. He becomes a member of the Quorum, as it's called, and the Quorum is a judicial body in Massachusetts. It's like a lower Supreme Court, and it's made up of wealthy, respectable members of society. But he's not there very long. He actually gets replaced by John Hancock. And I've said John Hancock a few times at this point talking about Higginson, and the reason I have is because despite their similarities and parallel career paths, Stephen Higginson and John Hancock are longtime rivals. They do not like each other. So when he gets replaced by Hancock, well, Higginson goes on the tack. You see, John Hancock had been governor of Massachusetts for quite some time. And then there were some angry farmers out west, so Hancock chooses not to run for governor again. And instead, Higginson's friend, James Bedoin, gets the position of governor. And while James Bedoin, I believe it's Bedoin, while James Bedoin is governor, well, those rowdy farmers out in western Massachusetts start Shays' Rebellion, and his friend, Governor Bedoin, has to oversee this little hostility here. It's very unpopular with many people in Massachusetts because, you know, there's essentially a civil war going on within the state. It was in this environment that John Hancock decides to run for governor again. And because of this, Stephen Higginson writes a bunch of articles in the local papers. And these articles become known as the Laco Letters. Now, the Laco Letters go on the attack. They really don't like Hancock, as you might expect. And the first and foremost major argument being thrown at John Hancock by Stephen Higginson in these letters is, Hancock, you were governor, and then Shays' Rebellion was about to break out, and you resigned your position as governor. You let someone else deal with Shays' Rebellion, the hard part about being a governor, and now that Shays' Rebellion's taken care of, oh, here comes John Hancock, just wants to get this back, doesn't he? Well, you can't just sit out the tough parts, Hancock. You gotta be there for everything. And it's, to be fair, a really good criticism, and a lot of people at the time felt the same way. But he also attacks Hancock because Hancock's reasoning for leaving the governorship was that he was ill. And truth be told, Hancock did suffer from health issues, especially at this point later in his life. But Hancock left governorship because he was ill, which, again, Higginson thinks he just didn't want to do the hard work. But now he's coming back. Well, Hancock, I thought you were ill. How will we know you're not just going to be ill again in the future? So, are you healthy or are you not? Make up your mind. Stop flop flipping. Now, one last thing is Higginson actually also criticized Hancock for not serving, for his lack of military service in the Revolutionary War, which is a fascinating criticism because Higginson also really didn't serve in the war. They both oversaw privateer ships, so they did essentially the same thing. Again, Higginson was writing what he thought was anonymously at the time, so you could see he would be a little bit hypocritical in that particular attack. Again, he was just trying to make sure Hancock didn't get the position. Didn't like Hancock very much. Fortunately for Higginson, the Laco Letters backfired because Hancock had broad popularity in Massachusetts. As you might imagine, the name Hancock still is familiar to almost every American in the world. So at the time, Hancock was very popular, and he wins in a landslide. Now, the Waco letters did have some truth to them, but they also had many assertions that were incorrect and just kind of on the attack for seemingly no reason. So, uh, because of this, it seems that a lot of people who read the Waco letters didn't know what they could or could not believe in it. Now, I will say, Higginson continues to hold minor offices through the rest of his career, but eventually, 15, almost 20 years later, he's associated with the Federalist Party, and he's associated with specifically people who attend the Hartford Convention. And as we've stated before, the Hartford Convention in Hartford, Connecticut was just at the end of the War of 1812, and short story long, it was the people who went were accused of trying to get New England to secede from the Union, and while that wasn't really the case, people associated with it had their careers kind of affected, and Higginson, just being friends with some of the people who attended, it kind of ended his political careers. He was already an old man at that point, though, so Stephen Higginson kind of just fades into the background of Massachusetts politics and really into the background of American history until today, where we're discussing him here. So I hope you learned a little bit about Stephen Higginson.